Good evening. My name is Jason Edwards, otherwise known as the Negotiator. It is absolute privilege and pleasure to be here this evening talking to you to do the first of these new recordings. What I want to do is to offer and provide you with something a little bit different this evening. I want to talk about a certain type of behavior that people often exhibit and how we can actually avoid that behavior, but within a certain set of circumstances. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm the owner of a consultancy called Vantage and Negotiation. I specialize in alternative dispute resolution, whereby I help people to resolve civil, commercial, workplace, and personal and private issues by not using the court system, by not using solicitors, but by meeting with a professional mediator or a professional negotiator with myself. And even though I say it myself, we get some pretty good results of actually enabling people to avoid conflict, avoid issues, and actually discussing better ways to move forwards. That's a little bit about myself. I've also worked for many years in different fields, including therapy. I wrote a book that became quite synonymous with helping people to get over coercive and manipulative behavior called Monsters Live Amongst Us. And it's actually that behavior that I want to discuss this evening. Tonight, I wanted to talk about how to avoid manipulation and coercion while you're actually taking part in a negotiation. Now, this has become a real specialist area of mine because a lot of people come to see me and ask me for help and support with coaching and support while they're undergoing issues at work. And it became very apparent to me recently of just how many people are having to live with coercive and manipulative managers and bosses. I myself have been someone who's had to work within different organizations where there have been, should we say, a regime of coercion and manipulation that has been used as the one and only tactic that management have actually had to actually enable people to move in a certain direction, to actually keep you in a certain place, to keep you down, to make you think you're not doing a good job at your actual job, just so your manager can have an easier life, can actually get you where they want you to be and not actually doing anything. It's kind of, you get these coercive managers who are a little bit like one trick ponies, and all they've got is like one skill, like divide and conquer, like manipulate or coerce. So the more work I do with people, the more the relevance and the importance that I realize in how to spot this and how to stop it. And we're not just talking about the classic narcissistic behavior, which has become very popular. We're basically just talking about how you can be coerced and manipulated in the easiest of situations. So what I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to talk you through a few steps that I actually support people with, those people that come and see me for coaching. I'm going to give you that tonight for nothing. We're actually going to bring down a few of the barriers. We're actually going to pull the curtain back, tell you how people do these things to you that you might not even realize is going on. So the first thing I always ask anyone is if they've come to me and they're either taking part in some sort of a mediation negotiation or they've got to go and have an interview with their boss, is always fact check. This is something we actually look over, and it's something we don't always bother to think about. If you are being called in for a meeting, or if you've got a manipulation that you think is going to befall you, one of the best weapons you can actually have is dragging people into reality. So always ask for the particulars of any negotiation. Always ask what the other side is looking for in a mediation. And if you've actually been called in for an interview, ask what those specific points are that you're being having to answer to or deal with. And fact check them. Because one of the things that we don't actually realize is so many people will mistake someone's opinion for a fact. I remember many years ago, there was a great film, and I think it was called Inside Out. And it was a Disney film, and it was about all the emotions in the head that this girl was having to deal with. And there's a wonderful bit where the emotions are walking through the body, and they come across a set of opinions, and the guide is walking them through and says, "Oh, watch out for those. They're opinions. People often get them mistaken for facts because they look very similar." So the first thing that you need to do is to drill down and do a bit of homework if you've been told something. If you've been told something is worth a certain value, if anyone has actually accused you of doing something, find out where the source of that information is coming from. The one thing you can't actually deal with, and I've had it leveled at me loads of times. In fact, it never used to occur to me when we had a very, very manipulative manager who will call you in and say, "You've done something," or "We've overheard something." And you'd say, "Where did the information come from?" And they'd say, "I can't say." So, what I always say to that now is, if anyone ever calls you in for anything and says, "We can't divulge the source of the information," is, "Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to actually strike everything off the record unless you can tell me and verify where that source has come from. As far as I'm concerned, it's completely made up." So always get your facts. It's one of the points of actually dispute resolution. Bill Urey, in his book, Getting to Yes, talks about getting down to the actual facts and reality. Um, finding finding a good even breaking ground. If there's a price that you're looking for, if somebody's telling you something is worth something, actually go to an independent source and get the facts that you actually need. When you've done that, the next stage that I always say to look out for, if you're negotiating, mediating, or if you've got something going on in your life that maybe it's a personal situation where you have to sit down with someone, look for what I call paper brick walls. Really interesting, this. And I'm going to reference another film, I'm afraid. A lot of my references always come from movies. Many years ago, there was a great movie, and it was called My Cousin Vinny with Joe Pesci. And he was talking to two young guys in it. He was going to take on their legal case, but he wasn't actually that skilled in legal procedures. But he spoke about something that was called a paper brick wall. He was talking to the guys about uh, the argument from the side. And he was saying, somebody will show you an argument. They'll show you it like this. They'll say, "This is the argument. You know, it's solid, it's heavy. It's, they'll show you the edges of it, almost like a brick. And they'll say, this is a solid argument. But if you turn it another way, if you look at it from another direction, it's paper thin, like a playing card. It's got solid sides, got a picture on it, but turn somebody else's argument another way, and you'll realize it's often paper thin. One of the ways I do this is by questioning somebody's language, because people will come up with things and they'll say, "Everyone agrees with me," or "the majority of people agree with that." And they'll level that at you as if the weight of numbers, as I've coined it, is a fact. And I remember once having this argument with someone in northern Italy where we were sat at a table and we were discussing a religion. And they say it's one of the things you should never get into an argument about. And there were several people at the table who said one of the doctrines of this religion is wrong. And they went, and I was curious as to why they thought what people did in this religion was wrong. And I went, well, what's your reasoning? And I went, well, we all think it. And I said, okay. And I went, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's 8 of you. eight of you all think it. And I said, I don't particularly feel that way. I said, I feel that they should be allowed to do that. And they went, yeah, but we all do. And I went, so because there's eight of you and one of me, that makes you right. I went, well, how many people follow this religion? There's probably several billion. So there's a lot more of them than there are of you. So does that now mean that they're right? And they didn't know where to go. So you have to be really careful when people throw in that everyone argument, that weight of numbers. It doesn't always add up. So even if you've got 10 men, women, mixed, telling you something, if you're the 11th person and you know different, don't let the weight of numbers sway you, because you will be coerced into a situation almost like the sheep just following the crowd. And you're actually going to find, if you're not careful, you're going to follow that crowd into the slaughterhouse. So be careful of that. Be careful of the word should. It's one of my least favorite words on the planet. I've had so many people say to me over the years, you should be doing that. Now, if you're in a certain situation of work where it is your job to ensure that a task gets done on a certain time, and for argument's sake, you should be doing that, fair point. But if somebody's bringing that in a more coercive level, for arguments, they're saying, well, you should be doing that every single day. And you're thinking, well, okay, but that's not what I do. That's not my job. Or you should make sure you always do A, B, and C. Again, question the logic, break it down. Is it a case of I could be doing that, as opposed to you should be doing that? It often gets married up with my other least favorite word, fair. People will say, you should. Here's a classic negotiation manipulation. This is the one that comes up all the time. If you're in a property negotiation of any sort, you will get this. You should be letting us have it at this price. It's a fair price. It's the fair thing to do. Somebody said this to me once when I was buying a car off them. They went, I think that's a fair price to ask, and you should really consider paying me that. Who says? Who says it's a fair price? If somebody uses that word fair, it has a lot of weight attached to it, again, like the weight of numbers. And it's put you in a situation where someone's saying, you're now out of integrity because you're not doing something that's fair. And you're on the back foot. So it's about questioning where do you get fair from? Fair doesn't really exist. We like to believe and conceptualize that fair exists. Now, if you're putting a deal together with someone, I always say to somebody, don't take all the money. In any kind of financial business deal, don't take all the money. Also, don't leave money on the table, but let your opposition make something on a deal as well. Let both people come off well, because you should be looking at any deal or negotiation as a long-term relationship. But don't do it under the guise of that's fair, because fair is etherical. It doesn't really exist. It's something we like. It's something we're told when we're children. That's, well, it's the fair thing to do, and that's a nice fair word to use. So just be careful of that word fair when it gets used in any situation. The other one, and now we really are getting down to some emotive language, is you offended me. You have offended me for this action. Now, if you've offended someone and you've done something and you're trying to repair a situation, if you're being called in to actually talk with a manager who says you've offended someone, apologize. I'm really sorry. I apologize. It wasn't my intent to offend you, but that's as far as it goes. If somebody says they're offended, make an apology, let it go and move forward. If they want to keep going back to that, I think to actually remind someone that being offended is very, very subjective. There's a brilliant Australian comedian, and I wish his name would come back to me, who does this fantastic sketch about people who are offended. And he often says, your comedy routine offended me the other night. And he was fine, be offended. Be offended. Being offended is objective. It shouldn't be used, there you go, should word, coming out as something to coerce you into changing your actions. Because you've offended these people, because you've done something so bad, they're now saying you've offended our delicate sensibilities. So we now think you should do that because it's the fair thing to do. And everyone agrees. See how this starts to actually put itself together now? It's like individual instruments. But when you put it together, it's like a whole orchestra of manipulation playing at you. So everyone agrees. Should. Only fair. Being offended. Be really mindful when somebody uses these words. Drill down into questions. Question what people say. Because a lot of the time, if you don't, you're actually going to run into problems yourself. One of my favorite questions, and I will not lay claim to this, I get it from a much more learned man, a guy called Chris Voss, who wrote a brilliant book, and I've attended some of his courses, and the book's called Never Split the Difference. When somebody levels something at you, ask them, how do I know this? Or how am I supposed to do that? If somebody says you should be doing so and so and so and so, how was I to know? How am I to do this? It's a really powerful word to use. And if somebody else comes at you with another question, well, how do you know that? Always reflect back. It's important that you do that. There's so many times when somebody will try and sneak in what I call a Trojan horse. They'll mention a whole list of things to you, and within this list of complaints and issues, they will try and put something in it. I remember sitting in a meeting many years ago, and a manager wanted to change the way we worked within a certain system. And they brought in all these, it was like these Trojan horse after Trojan horse after Trojan horse. They were wheeling all these things into the table, and they were talking about inconsistencies, health and safety issues, lack of proper administration. But what they were doing, they were adding all these arguments up, so we would change the way we worked. But actually, none of it was true. They were all hidden Trojan horses. It's the old story, the wooden horse of Troy. I always say to people, if you've ever heard that story where the city of Troy is under siege and they wheel a wooden horse up and say, we've got this lovely gift for you, we wish to make peace. And they say, oh, that's brilliant. And they wheel the horse in. And at night, all the troops that are hidden in the wooden horse come out and kill everyone and let everyone into the city. What would have happened if the people of Troy, when they'd have wheeled this wooden horse up, have said, yeah, very nice, leave it outside. Yeah, we've got one. A bit like Monty Python. Yeah, no thanks, it's okay, we've already got one. The city of Troy wouldn't have fallen. So when somebody's presenting you with an argument, try and see what is behind it. Are they trying to sneak something in the back door? Um, One of the things that we can absolutely suffer with when we're trying to build relationships in a negotiation, when we're trying to mediate, when we're trying to deal with issues with other people in the workplace, is what I call portcullis and drawbridge. We're all about combat tonight, aren't we? Wooden horse of Troy, portcullis, drawbridge. On the old medieval castles, there would be a drawbridge that would be lowered over a moat that would let people in, and there would be a portcullis, the old metal gates that would be hired to let people come across into the keep. I developed this working with a fantastic young man many years ago who had a few social anxieties and was worried that the people he was working with were coercing him. So, what I'd said to him was, why don't you allow those people you work with to come across the drawbridge, but keep your portcullis down? In as much as when they pursue, don't open up to them too much. Don't give people information. Reflect things back to them. Question other people's questions. When people ask something of you, you can say, sounds like you're really interested in knowing more about my life. Or seems like you really want an answer to that. So you can do that. You can allow people to get close or feel they've got close, but at the same time, don't take their thoughts on board. Don't agree with them. Now, I know it sounds like you're being very guarded, but let's be honest, sometimes in a negotiation, sometimes at work, you need to keep that guard up. Work can be difficult, work can be hard in any situation. And sometimes you do nothing more than share a piece of carpet space with the people you work with. I think we get into the wrong kind of relationships at work. Sometimes it's nice to have friends at work, but a lot of the time we can end up getting too friendly with people. And before we know it, they've come across the drawbridge, you've lifted the portcullis up, they've got in on your life, and empires always fall from within. So be really, really careful. I know a lot of the information I've given you tonight sounds very gladiatorial. I know a lot of it doesn't sound like a lot of the modern talk that we really applaud these days, which is bringing down barriers, caring, sharing, understanding. I'm all for that. I'm all for equality. I'm all for diversity. I'm all for inclusion. But we have to be careful because if we're to be brave and step out into this new world where we want to be more inclusive with people, there will still be people out there in this life who will look to coerce and look to manipulate. And this is particularly prevalent when you're negotiating with people. This is particularly prevalent in work situations and also when you're trying to take part in any mediation. I really hope that everything that I've discussed with you tonight has helped. It's been an absolute pleasure launching this with the incredible young man who's just taken on so much, the great Jack Gregory, and really wants to use this whole new venture to drive things forward and to help and support people. So please take part. Please watch the videos. They're all going to be highly informative, very insightful, and there's going to be some great people coming up over the coming weeks who are really going to be able to educate you and support you. I've very much enjoyed this evening. Thank you very much for listening. My name's been Jason Edwards. Thank you.